It's early Sunday morning. The Sunday edition of the Anchorage Daily News is rolling off the press, soon to be delivered to thousands of Alaskans across the state. Along with news, opinion, and facts and fancy of the moment comes We Alaskans, the Sunday magazine. Kathleen McCoy hopes this picture and this story will capture the eye and interest of Alaskan readers. Kathleen is the editor of We Alaskans and the writer of the story. We'll follow Kathleen as she does a magazine piece on Nancy and Jim Lethco, a couple who lives and works on a sailboat in Prince William Sound. Kathleen's job is telling stories about Alaskans for Alaskans.
I got into journalism because I like to write, and I get to write for We Alaskans, but I also get to sort of try to have a vision for it in a way that a writer doesn't have on a writer has a vision for a single story, but as an editor you try to have a vision for the whole product.
Even with a vision for the magazine, writing an article is a challenge. Here is the beginning of Kathleen's first draft.
All eyes are fixed on the glaciers, 3 of them hanging into the pale turquoise waters of Barry Arm in Prince William Sound. A mile offshore, 5 sailboats motor in lazy ovals, circling back for the best view of Cascade, Barry, and Cox.
There's a thing about writing that I'm sort of learning more about, which is, you know, you sort of have this person who writes inside and then you have the critic inside, and you have to really learn to lock the critic in the closet for a while so you can get something out. The person I gave the story to first was Peter, who was my first editor here at the Daily News, my first official editor at the Daily News, and so he's a very good editor, and you can trust that he's not going to tell you did a good job just to be a good friend.
She went through hell coming up with the first draft of this story. She maybe won't say it that way, but it was a lot of agony just to produce the first draft, and she knew something was wrong with it, even though she was relieved to have it done with.
And it's really great to take a reality check and have somebody else read it and see if you've managed to get them to care about it the same way. And
I actually knew about the Lethco story before seeing the story in print. Kathleen talked to me about it. I mean, the day she got back from the weekend, she was excited about it and told me some. But when I first read the story, I was actually a little disappointed.
he picked up on what was exciting to me too, but sort of with all the efforts to start a good beginning, I'd kind of buried what was the best part of the story, and I had to kind of unearth it again.
And I would have done the same thing, I know it. I too would have come back and I would have been enthralled and I would have described the beautiful mountains and the glaciers and the sea and the animals, but that wasn't the way to begin the story. Because we were just not getting to the heart of it. What we had to do was tell the reader right away that, hey, here we've got two very, very interesting people, and you're going to meet them, and this is what they've done. They're almost the quintessential Alaskan dream, right there. Drop out of the mainstream and find their way. I think everybody wants to do that. Find a creative life amid all the splendor.
I knew we were going to be with them for 2.5 days and that we had to accomplish a lot. They had to become comfortable with me pretty quickly, and I didn't really know what kind of people they were. How do a man and a woman live on a sailboat and stay married? How do they live out in the Sound in the wintertime and not see anybody for several months at a time? I knew they had a daughter who was living in Whittier, and I called her up, and she turned out to be a great informant on her parents. Basically, I try to be a fly on the wall, I think, you know, at first, to try to figure out what's going on and what people's personalities are like and how they feel about things. And you don't want to go in like gangbusters and say, oh, I'm Kathleen McCoy for the Daily News, sit down and tell me about your life. And I'm pretty quiet, and sometimes I'll wait for a long time to even take out my notebook.
I appreciated the fact that she had done her research before she came to talk to us. The questions she asked were different from the questions that most people ask.
She didn't seem to be merely interested in facts and data and figures and things of that nature, but she really came across as being interested in you as a person. And her style of interview seems to be to try to get to know you as a person.
We didn't feel that we were just part of an afternoon story or a momentary episode in Kathy's life. She came aboard, she spent several days with us, she washed the dishes, she went ashore with us, she walked the dog, she raised the sails. She got to see what we did every day in our lives, and from that was able to formulate questions to ask us.
Do you ever gather and can or
No.
anything like that? It has to be eaten right away.
I eat it right away, everything. I don't want to. I just want to like to pick and take a little bit. I don't want to destroy the. I mean, they're part of the area out here.
What about coming ashore in winter versus coming ashore in the summer?
Summertime.
You have different.
Sure.
Different
This
missions.
is under snow in the wintertime. This is ski area.
Yeah.
We go
So-
cross-country skiing, exploring. I also do tracking. I'm not good at tracking animals through bogs in the summertime. I'm
Right.
sorry, but. In the wintertime, you can really see their tracks, and you can see their trails in the summertime.
Yeah.
But in the wintertime, you can go ashore and you can see they were here yesterday, they're not here today, or they weren't here yesterday, and how recently
And
they
so
are.
you've got martin, mink.
Martin, mink, weasels. Some places deer. Oh, it was an avalanche. And then they
I used to think a long time ago that, well, I'd make a lousy journalist because I can't, rush right in and ask that breaker question. The kind of stories I've ended up doing haven't been those kind of stories. They've been more stories about people that reveal how people are, and they have to tell you, you can't make it up. I went to this big university, and it took me a while just to get up the courage to apply for the journalism degree, because it was right after Woodward and Bernstein, and everybody wanted to be a journalist, and so you had to sort of convince them that you had the right stuff. Eventually, I wormed my way in, and I also worked on the student newspaper in college, which was an off-campus paper. It had been thrown off campus by the administration. This was, during the early 70s, and it was a school that had been real active in anti-war protest movements.
What school was it?
It was Berkeley. When I got out of college, I did have a degree in journalism, and I tried in the Bay Area to get jobs, but I didn't have enough experience there, so I ended up going a couple of 100 miles away to a small paper in Auburn. So I kind of moved all over California working on small papers like this, and after a while quitting and traveling somewhere, and then coming back and getting another job, and that's kind of how I ended up in Alaska. I thought, if I'm in California, I have to work for the Los Angeles Times or I'm a complete failure. And so I started freelancing for them. I had a brother in Alaska at the time who was saying, how could you stay in Los Angeles when you could be in Alaska? And so I ended up coming here. I heard about the job at the Nome Nugget before I left left Los Angeles, and I called them up and said, look, I've got a degree in journalism, and I hear you've got an opening, and they hired me sight unseen. And I thought at the time, oh my gosh, I went from thinking and hoping and dreaming that someday I'd get hired on the Los Angeles Times to working at the Nome Nugget. I'd always worked in towns where if you worked on the newspaper, nobody knew who you were, you know, and here suddenly in Nome, if you work on the newspaper, everyone knows who you are, and they remember what you wrote about them last. Eventually, though, I thought this town is too small for me. I really need a bigger town, and I need a daily newspaper. And it was a great time to be at the Daily News because it was in a very, and is still in a very competitive situation, and we were part of that team. There was that team feeling there then that was really neat to be a part of. The way I see my role as an editor is not sort of a dictator from the top, you know, who just says, this is the way it is. The more people who work on We Alaskans and can have an investment in it and can care about it, the better the magazine's going to be. And I really want the photo editor to be involved in the process and to care about it, you know. And the same way with the photographer. It's kind of a labor of love for everybody who's involved, you know. And we can sort of shepherd the thing all the way through the process. And it all ends up on the designer's desk, and he's got this long story and a lot of pictures, and he's going to try to marry those two in a way that's irresistible. Once the design is done, it goes through the copy desk, and he'll be reading my story and looking at the design, making sure that all the directions on the design work, and that he has no problems with the story. It conforms to our newspaper style, and he releases the story on the tube, and it comes out in the production area in a long strip that the paste-up artists will start laying it out according to the designer's directions on the dummy sheets. Then plates will be made out of those pages, and those plates will go on the press, and then it'll run. Usually runs on Thursdays and comes out with the Sunday paper on Sunday. So that's the way it happens, week after week, 52 weeks a year.
You know, my biggest relationship with the magazine editor, with Kathleen, is to try and be as supportive as I can, because Kathleen is a very creative person. Kathleen is a person who has good ideas and a tremendous desire to see them come about. She wants to make it happen. She wants that to be the best magazine that it could possibly be.
I sort of feel like that the mandate here is to surprise Howard in a good way as often as you can, and that's a great thing to be working with. And if there's something I'm working on, or we have a range of ideas we're thinking about, you know, embarking on, I sort of like to throw him out there and hear what he thinks about him. And he's generally very good at telling you what you know, it's almost he kind of lights up when there's one that he really likes. Part of wanting it to be really good is this idea that you keep striving really hard and you're not satisfied, and each project you think, what's the best way for me to do this one, you know, not just how can I get it done, but how can I make it really special. And I often feel like if you think you've arrived, it's probably all over. You know, I hope to never arrive. I hope to always be at the beginning and always be looking at it as something that's not going to be easy, but it's sure going to be fun.
This is Kotzebue. It's north of the Arctic Circle on Norton Sound. About 2,500 people live here. Ongtooguk came to Kotzebue about 5 years ago, right out of the university. As an Eskimo teaching in schools which have few Eskimo teachers, Paul brings unique attitudes, insights, and priorities to his classes.
I wanted to teach because when I graduated from high school, 1975 from Nome Belts, one of the things that struck me was for all that I had done, having graduated, from the courses I'd taken, from the teachers that I had, I could have been in Ohio or Texas or somewhere in the lower 48. There was nothing in the curriculum, there was nothing in the courses that I took while I was there that told me anything about the people of the region, the history of the region, the concerns of Northwest Alaska.
What year
It seemed kind of strange.
Paul's path to Kotzebue High was a winding and difficult one, which took him to Japan, Oklahoma, California, Rhode Island, and Washington State. Paul's father, Tommy Ongtooguk, was born in Teller, raised in Wales, and settled in Nome. He opted for a career in the military and served much of that time abroad. About the time Paul's father completed his 20 years service, Paul's mother died.
And my mom died. It was a real tough time. It was a real tough time for my dad. I mean, lost his wife. He had 4 kids. Pretty rough for him. My dad wanted to take us all to Alaska. Yeah, so he wanted us to go north, and I was real excited about that. Got as far as Sitka, Alaska, and I talked to my dad, and why did we settle in Sitka? I mean, we weren't, we're not Tlinkits, we're not Haida. Well, why did we settle there? He said, well, basically we ran out of money before we got any farther north. And he thought that he would stop there and work for a while and then keep moving north again. But it didn't work out that way.
Paul's father went to work in the Sitka fishing fleet. He was gone much of the time.
Because he had been gone before when my mom was there. He had been stationed overseas, been at Iwo Jima. He had been Southeast Asia. So it wasn't the first time that he was gone. We can handle that. We all talked about wishing that our mom was there. She really made it feel like a home. And we didn't realize how important she was until she was gone.
The situation came to the attention of government social workers.
And one day these people come in with briefcases and notepads, suits, and they said, well, we'd like to interview you. They went into the bedroom, and one of them was out with the other 3, and they would interview each one of us. And after having done that, I said, well, we're going to deal with all these problems. Before we knew it, the next thing that was going on is that we're on a jet to Oklahoma, and just removed us. When we were taken to Oklahoma, the family was split up. We were put into different foster homes, and we only occasionally saw each other after that point. We were reasonably straight kids, before we went out. But after we got into those situations, after we got some experience with kids who had been in reformatories and things of that nature, that's where you learn all the bad habits.
Eventually, an uncle, his mother's brother, arranged for Paul to live with him in Long Beach, California.
It was an almost perfect suburban life. My uncle was a police officer. Kids were going to a private Catholic school. The family went on picnics. We went on trips, scuba diving. He had a weight room. We worked out in the weight room. It was a real sedate school where people worried about things like grades rather than more elementary things like whether or not they were going to get the crap beaten out of them, or if they were going to get stabbed, or occasionally people were shot, in Oklahoma. In California, that was just unthinkable.
Paul took his first year of high school in Long Beach, and then his father, who had moved back to Nome, asked his sons to join him. Paul flew back to Alaska, to Nome. At Nome's Belts High School, Paul found pressure of a different kind. To deal with it, he and fellow students started the Nome Walk-In Center.
The walk-in center was mostly a place to get away from adults and yet still be warm and still be able to meet friends without being around drink. It was a place that had a no-drink policy. We played chess there, talked, played our own music, and if we needed it, there were people who were willing to talk about whatever problems we were having, that our families were having.
Paul kept late hours working at the walk-in center, and so did the youth pastor at the church his father attended. Because of it, Paul and this woman missionary met. It was she who encouraged Paul to go on to college.
Nobody ever mentioned college and my name together, certainly. And so when the youth pastor suggested that I go out to school, and of course she was interested in future missionaries or pastors, so she wanted me to go to a Bible school. Basically, the alternatives were I wasn't doing anything else, and it was still a school, and I was interested, but just kind of flattered that anybody would think that I could do it. So I sent off the application. The application asked if you smoked, drank, or danced, and I marked yes on all three. That was because I was dancing over at the senior center, Eskimo dancing, and I hadn't smoked in years, and I didn't drink really, a glass of wine maybe every now and again, but the way I figured it was if they were willing to accept me on those terms, then maybe it would work out. And I went off to school, and it worked. It was real hard.
Paul and Debbie met at Zion Bible Institute. They are now married and have a daughter. It was a long path to get here. After a couple of years at Zion, Paul transferred to a small liberal arts college in Washington State. Later, he studied at the University of Washington.
Getting my teaching certificate from the University of Washington has made a tremendous difference in working with other teachers and with the professional educators, because there have been a lot of occasions when I've talked to other teachers about teaching the Land Claims Act or teaching in rural Alaska, where somebody has remarked, well, where did you get your teaching certificate? And there's kind of a question mark on the end of it. Like, you know, did you, what they were asking really is, have you really earned your certificate, or were you in one of these so-called giveaway programs for rural teachers? And to be able to say, I graduated from the University of Washington, where did you graduate from? Has made a big difference. Land, they paid us what they consider to be our social and economic need, not what the land was worth.
This was an important time for Alaska Natives.
All right, what statewide
Congress had passed the Land Claims Act, and now it was being put into effect.
Go ahead,
Paul read everything he could about the Claims Act.
The Alaska Federation of Natives. There we go. Right, Nikki's got one.
He started thinking land claims, I guess, that I was aware of a year before he got his teaching certificate. He really loves history, and that's how he started into the teaching field. That was his area of expertise.
Paul was hired in Kotzebue to develop a course of studies dealing with regional concerns.
There just wasn't much in the way of written material that was appropriate for kids. When Paul came to teach here, I gave him that assignment. I knew it was an interest area of his. He was a social studies major. So he started off teaching a course that had no textbook and no materials, and really not too much of a guideline. And at the same time, he was brand new. So it was pretty tough starting out.
He's a real good teacher. He really knows how to deliver lectures, and you know, at times he's serious, but most of the time he's a lot of fun to be around.
Makes you want to keep going. It's hard, but it's real good.
It was the first class like that I took, the first class that really drove at me. And yeah, it helped. It helped a lot.
You know, his class is a lot of fun, and it's one of the hardest classes in the school, besides math and science.
Mr. O has a certain quality that really makes you want to learn what he's trying to deliver.
Paul has expanded his Inupiat Studies course to television as an economical way to offer the materials to the rest of his school district, and any other school in the state which wants to use it.
Hello, I'm Paul Ongtooguk, and this is the second of an 8-part series on Inupiaq Studies. Before we get any further into the program, I'd like to have a check on the teleconference site participants, the Inupiaq Studies teachers from our villages. Is Sally here from Ambler?
We ask teachers who usually come from outside, who have little understanding of this region, to teach Inupiaq Studies. And to get the information, the curriculum information to them, we decided that the best way to handle this would be through the series of 8 programs, whereby Paul would instruct them directly. They could ask questions or ask for further elaboration on what he was saying through an audio conference on the air.
When I met him, he was a real angry man, a real angry young man, angry at the way his life had gone, and just thought that the world was out to get him and he could do nothing right, and in the end he would fail. And as we took step by step, he started to see that he could change that. And the hope that built in him was just wonderful to see him reaching out for new goals and finding success, and he began to realize he could help other people find success, believe in themselves, and turn things around.
It has been a bumpy journey, but now Paul is home. To paraphrase Henry Van Dyke, it's home again and home again, the Arctic for Paul. Paul works to build its future by breathing life into its past.
Up and down Alaska's coast, thousands of men and women are attracted to commercial fishing as a way of life. For some, it is a symbol of freedom and adventure and the road to riches. For others, fishing may be the only life they know. This is a fishing village. It is Pelican on Chichagof Island in southeastern Alaska. Almost nothing goes on here which is not in some way related to fishing. It is here in Pelican that Jim Phillips was raised. His father is a fisherman, so is his mother and his brother. Jim's wife also comes from a fishing family. Jim is one of the youngest commercial fishing boat skippers along the southeastern Alaska coast. Jim Phillips and his crew are heading for the rough waters of the Gulf of Alaska. He'll be fishing for sablefish, often called black cod. Jim is soft-spoken. Nevertheless, his determination to succeed seeps through his quiet words.
Well, I like to be my own boss, for one. I've grown up with fishing. And it's like doing your own thing out there, and that's what I like to do.
Harold Thompson runs a fish processing plant in Sitka. He knows Jim well, and he knows what it takes to make it as a skipper.
You have to be hard driving and resourceful, intelligent. They have to be a manager of a crew and a manager of their business. It takes a real rounded individual that's willing to work hard and stay away from home for long periods of time. So I have nothing but high regard for fishermen and particularly skippers that can make a go of it.
Thompson and others in the industry who know Jim believe he is a person who can succeed in the fishing business. Jim's father, Jake Phillips, is looked upon as a leader among the southeastern Alaska trollers and longline fishermen. He gave Jim his start fishing.
I can remember Jim coming with us in September. We were short-handed one year, and he must have been at least all of 6 or 7 years old. In fact, he was so young and so small, and my wife had to knit him up a pair of oilskins, sew him up a pair of oilskins. And that was his first. He was cooking on the other boat I had at the age of 11. And then from then on, and he worked himself into full share by the time he was 17, I guess. And then he first ran the Nancy K. I think he was 19 the first time he took it on his own.
About 6 years old, I started cutting bait with a knife. And my dad said we could do that. It's just been from then on. So we started coiling the knife after I cut bait. Then it was time to learn. So I've been doing it ever since. I think I make a better deckhand as a skipper right now.
Since Jake Phillips began fishing in the 1950s, things have changed. Dwindling numbers of some kinds of fish, restrictions, and an ever-changing technology are the new realities. Formal education plays an increasingly important part in the day-to-day life of a fisherman or woman.
Didn't even finish high school, but you know, some people will say, well, it didn't stop you, but when I did it in the 50s and 60s and now are two different things. And
I urged my boys to get more education. I'm still urging them to spend their free time and get more education, because in the future in this industry they're going to need it. They're going to need it to cope.
After high school, Jim went to college for a time. He has second thoughts about that experience now.
I paid my own tuition, and I went for a semester, and about a third of the way through, I just said, nah, this is not what I want to do. I'm a laborer. And when I figured that out, I said, well, I'll just quit. Go find a job. Couldn't see. I didn't want to go to school anymore. As I look back at it now, I should have did a lot better than I did. And if I ever go again, I'm going to get something out of it.
The fishing boat skipper has to have a great range of skills, the most important of which probably don't appear related to fishing at first glance. Eric Jordan is a fisherman working out of Sitka.
The most important skill is not the ability to catch fish. The most important skill is to manage your business, manage your boat, keep it in shape, keep it operating, keep your finances in order so that you have money to invest in new gear, to make your payments and those kind of things.
A calm day on the Gulf of Alaska seems to make up for all the pressures and problems.
Don't really want to get rich. I just want to live a happy, safe life.
Jim and his wife Patty live about a 15-minute skiff ride from Pelican.
Come on, pick them up.
They have 2 young sons.
Come on, get. Come on. There we go. Very good guy.
In a sense, skippering one's own fishing boat offers a wonderful sense of independence. However, it can be a strain on young families. Patty and Jim face their separations philosophically.
I'm away a lot of the time. And yeah, it's tough, especially with us being younger. You know, me and my wife have two boys, so I miss them a lot.
He's gone a lot, but I knew from the first that he was a fisherman. I have to accept it. And we make up for all lost time when he comes back. It's good because I can have my own life, you know, do things that I want to really do when he's gone, and when he's back, then he helps me get involved with his life, things on the boat. I don't get to actually go fishing, but there's other parts to fishing than pulling the gear on board.
I have to do a lot more with my boat now than I have before, rather than just long-lining halibut and blackcod, sablefish. I now have to look into other fisheries.
Because there's more boats in the business now, more competition, so it's harder to to make a living now than it was in the past, I think.
I'm usually fishing 10 months of the year anyway, so in the wintertime, fall time, I tie up my boat and go crabbing as a deckhand.
My father was lost on the ocean, so I know it's risky. And I used to be afraid. I said I'd never marry a fisherman, but I've been raised a fisherman's daughter, so I know what it's like. And Jake, Jim's dad, he sat me down one time and had a good talk with me about I can't be afraid of things like that. He's taught Jim all he knows, and Jim plus more. So he's in good hands. He knows what he's doing. I feel secure knowing that. It makes me feel a lot better, a lot more secure, knowing that he's always going to come back.
There's definitely the risk of you're out there and you're in the weather, you can't control it, but that's up to each individual to figure out when it becomes too risky for the fishing. How good or otherwise, I'm going to live as a fisherman and die as a fisherman. So, whether it's in a little trawler or a little skiff or something, that's my niche in life, I guess.